Well, Oregon and Washington are off to the Big Ten together with USC and UCLA. But are they really making the right decision here? Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. So if you have not already, like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, please and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show. We recently hit 3,000 subs on YouTube. That was our goal before the season. We are now continuing to soldier on. 4,000 is the next goal. Can we do it by the end of the season? I believe that we can. Today we have Roman Tomashoff on the show. He is at rtomashoff34 on Twitter. He is the newest host here at the Locked On Network. He's the host of Locked On Washington Huskies. He also writes about the Dogs and covers them for Fan Nation at Sports Illustrated. Oregon fans, I command you, be nice. Be nice. Play nice. Come on now. We can be grown-ups and still be passionate fans of our teams. But Roman, it's great to have you at the network. Great to have you on the show. And Oregon fans should be getting used to seeing him around every now and then when we talk about the Huskies, as we will today. But off the top, I just want your thoughts on whether or not you feel Oregon and Washington are making the right decision going to the Big Ten.
Well, first off, Spencer, thanks for having me on Locked On Ducks. It's an honor to be a part of the Locked On Podcast Network and be on this show. So yeah, Duck fans, hi. I don't bite. I swear I'm not that mean. But yeah, no, honestly, I know you have your thoughts as being the host of Locked On Pac-12. But I really think that Oregon and Washington are making the right decision here. And yeah, I understand that a lot of this does come down to money at the end of the day, and sacrificing tradition and everything that the Pac-12 has had for so long is a really hard thing to get over. I've talked to some friends of mine this weekend who were saying similar things like, oh, what about the Apple Cup? What about this? What about that? And it's difficult. Truly, it is. But when we look at, especially with the programs Oregon and Washington are right now, these are perennial top 20, top 25 programs in the not in the conference, in the country every single year. And can they do that in the Pac-12 that, gets maybe 500,000 streams on Apple TV? Honestly, no.
Well, I figured that they probably would have gotten more than that, but the exposure question was a legitimate one.
Yeah, and also just a quick interesting number that a friend of mine threw out last week. Lionel Messi, arguably the biggest athlete in the world, only got Inter Miami and Apple TV to 800,000 subscribers on the platform. So what does that say for what the Pac-12 can do without USC, without UCLA, and just not to throw any shots at any of these other teams, but generally smaller markets? It's something that really does need to be considered, and with Oregon or Washington getting a full share come 2030, which could pay out somewhere between $70 and $80 million a year at a, maybe somewhat generous estimate there, but something that definitely needs to be considered.
Yeah, and I think that they got forced into this situation of making a move that is rooted in self-preservation, because the Pac-12, for the second time in the conference's modern iteration, was offering you a media entity that was not a surefire ordeal.
Yes. In
Apple TV, the potential you could see. But guess what? The Pac-12 network was sold in the same way. It was, hey, we're going to own the network. We're not partnering with a major broadcast entity, and we're going to, prioritize this, that, and the other thing. We don't need DirecTV and to have the channel be on there and whatnot. And it hurt exposure, and it hurt dollar figures over the course of the entire network's tenure, to where everyone looks at the Pac-12 network and says, yeah, that was a failure. That was a blatant misstep. And it was at the time seen as a forward-thinking concept. But then it evolved over time, and we watched how everything was playing out and realized, yeah, we're not doing that. So when an option was presented to the Ducks and the Huskies to go somewhere where you can guarantee, now I imagine Apple would have subleased some games onto linear. I just couldn't see ESPN completely getting out of West Coast football. I don't think they would have done that. But would you have been able to guarantee that? Again, no. So chance, certainty. I think they did make the right move from a conference standpoint. Lament it though I do. And these are two distinct feelings that I want to make clear to everybody. I do not like that this move got made. I do, however, understand why it was made and recognize that it was the best option available. But the other side of the coin, and this is where, time will truly tell whether or not we're correct in saying this at this point in time, is the biggest goal, and what I, heard reported in a couple different places that could keep Oregon and Washington in the Pac long term, is access to the playoff. And if you won the Pac in what it was going to be with those 10 teams, or even without Colorado, 9 teams and a few other ones, that still would have been essentially an automatic berth into the college football playoff. But now going into the Big Ten, Roman, it's not as easy of a path. Losses are not as punitive, but at the very least, the path to a conference championship is just so much tougher. And so you're going to be reliant at some level on outside factors for the Ducks and the Huskies to make the playoff, because you can't bank on winning the conference any more than like 1 in every 4 years. And,
sure.
And frankly, that might even be optimistic when you consider it's Ohio State, it's Michigan, it's Oregon, it's Washington, it's USC, UCLA is in the mix. Like
Penn State, too.
Penn State, Wisconsin. You're not winning that league more than, once every 4 years at the most? I think that's at the most. So you have to find a way to navigate a 10-2 schedule, and you have to have 2 good losses, and then you need to have open at-large playoff spots.
No, you're absolutely right. But I think the one thing that really does need to be considered, and I said this over on Locked On Huskies the other day when we were talking about the Huskies move to the Big Ten, is it's sink or swim. And yeah, there might be one auto bid that, the Oregon wins the conference in 2025. Awesome, they get the auto bid. But then everybody else is just kind of going to get left out in the cold. Like, let's say Utah hangs around, but they go 9-3, 10-2. The Huskies do the same thing. And they just kind of get left out, and they have to go to, no offense, they have to go back to the Alamo Bowl. It's not the same. And who's to say a couple of years down the line because we know how often the college football playoff changes and things are just consistently fluid. Who's to say that, the Huskies and Ducks stick around and all of a sudden the committee, when they're renegotiating, says, maybe there won't be auto bids for conference champions, which feels like it's a possibility just for
and they're looking at renegotiating that right now, given the conference realignment, because the Pac, whatever it'll be or wherever those schools end up, it's not going to be a power conference. I can't see how a league made up of you need at least 8 teams, so it would be at minimum 50% G5 schools from 2023 is considered a power league and gets an auto bid the same way the SEC, Big Ten, ACC, Big 12 do. I just can't see how that continues to exist in that format. I think they'd have to reconsider, and I think they should, but that still brings you to the 5 highest rated conference champions and 7 at-large bids. But those 7 at-large bids, they're not all coming from the Big Ten, right? No. Like, you're going to have all the schools I mentioned, Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin. They're going to vie for it from the Big Ten. Oh, by the way, don't forget Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia, LSU, Tennessee. Like, it is not going to be as easy to get into the playoff. And I think that's the drawback for the Ducks and the Huskies. And then you have teams in the ACC, and then you have teams for the Big 12. Like, that is the downside. The upside is you ensure relevance, stability, and competitiveness. But the downside is you do not ensure as open of a path to the playoff.
No, that's 100% right, because there are so many moving parts with all of this. But I just real quick, as being the Huskies guy on here, I just remember in 2016 when the Huskies did make the college football playoff, they won the conference, and it still wasn't a sure thing that they were going to get in. There were some people that I remember just watching ESPN. I was out living in Boston at the time before I covered the team in any capacity. And there were legitimate arguments for Penn State, who lost in the Big Ten championship to Ohio State that year, to get in over the Huskies.
No, I think they beat Ohio State that year. I think that was the one year that they that they broke through.
That year was Alabama and Clemson in the championship, and I'm pretty sure Ohio State made that one at number 3.
Yeah, so Penn State was an 11-2 team. That was the debate.
Right.
They were an 11-2 Big Ten champion in 2016, and the debate was whether or not Washington should get in as a one-loss, weaker Pac-12 champion because that's the year when Oregon was really bad. They were 4-8. I think Stanford was starting to go down on the Washington won.
This is still the discussion, though.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's no sure thing.
Yeah. No. I completely agree. We're gonna get to talking about football for this year though, because the Week 7 matchup is it's gonna have a strange feeling, which we need to talk about. We need to talk about Nutrafol as well, because Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements use physician-formulated, natural, science-backed ingredients. Their drug-free, patented technology provides consistent, reliable results without compromising your health. So, take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair for a limited time. Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled NUTRAFOL.com/men, and enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Nutrafol.com/men, promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Now, Roman, you're new here, but that right there is what we call the second segment sip, because you have to continue to keep yourself as fresh and ready as possible to deliver the best show you can.
I 100% respect it, and if I had a water bottle sitting next to me, I would have joined you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. See. Yeah. I'm always prepared. Always prepared with it. Can't operate in any other world. But I would like to operate in a world, Roman, where Oregon gets at least one, maybe two College GameDay appearances this year, and that game that they are going to play at the Huskies, which now is slated at the moment to at the very least be a top 15 matchup, could be a top 10, top 12, depends on how things go. But Washington and Oregon both have favorable with one noticeably more difficult game than the others. I think Oregon definitely has the toughest game in those first 5 weeks between either of the two teams, going at Texas Tech, and then you'd probably rank the next toughest is Washington's at Michigan State, going to East Lansing. But they're a much bigger favorite against the Spartans than the Ducks are against the Red Raiders. But still, you could have a world in which College GameDay could be going up to your neck of the woods in Seattle, which is actually where I'm recording the show from right now, if you didn't know. That's very possible. If Oregon and Washington are able to get through the early part of their schedules unscathed, I look at GameDay and where else they could be going that week, and boy, there's a long way to go. A lot of storylines can emerge. It's an unpredictable world, but if things go the way that they should, Oregon and Washington could very well be GameDay in Week 7.
No, you're 100% right. And I think that one thing that kind of needs to be considered in this is what we just talked about, the move to the Big Ten. Because I feel like that's a factor that ESPN will kind of say, oh, with this going on, this is just something that's going to be relevant throughout the season, as, it's with all due respect, the death of the pack. With that going on, RIP. With all that going on, that could be a storyline that they want to cover and just say, this is one of the most storied rivalries in the Pac-12. We have to get up there. These are two awesome teams. You and I kind of went through it before the show. There aren't necessarily a lot of other great matchups that week. And I know you'll run through a couple of them that just to kind of say, oh, maybe here, maybe there. But I think that this is just a premier matchup that has flown under the radar for so long. I thought it was really great when I saw all these Big Ten fans on Twitter just saying, "Oh, what do we need to know about Oregon and Washington?" And it's where do we start there?
How about they don't care for one another all the time. There have been a few instances. There was a point Then there was a Mario Cristobal post-game locker room speech. There's been dogs down. There's been all like it's across the board. Like I think every Oregon fan listening to or watching this knows it's a great rivalry in college football, truly. And I agree with you completely that it's under the radar, and I think that it's probably the best one. It's not the most watched one because that's USC UCLA in the pack over the years, but I think it's the best one because I don't ever get the sense that there's as much animosity between the Bruins and the Trojans. Not that there isn't any, but it's not like Oregon Washington.
No, and this is coming from somebody who lived in Los Angeles for his entire life.
Yeah,
but no, it's not even close. Also, I want to make a quick point on Dubs Down. It's just an M. It's literally not like, look, it's an M. just want to throw that out there for the Oregon fans. But
I'm sure the comment section is going to love that interpretation.
Bring it on.
So the other games I want to get through this real quick. The other games that week that could be game day in week 7. Now this is a preseason AP top 25, but also I think is fairly indicative of the big time matchups you could have. Texas A&M at Tennessee, I think is going to depend. I mean on how those two schools perform. Yep. Now, Old Rocky Top is a heck of a scene in college football. We all have to be honest and acknowledge that. And if Tennessee is top 10 and Texas A&M is just even top 25, I bet you the border war loses out to any time they'd have the opportunity to go to Old Rocky Top. But the other game in there is USC Notre Dame, and that's a tough one to compete with. I don't know if anything's different because they're on NBC. Usually that's not the case. That ESPN goes to places for game day that have Fox, where Fox is broadcasting the game all the time. I mean, last year they came to Oregon UCLA. That game was on Fox. Yeah, and I think that's a great game. Like I would be bummed if it missed being game day if both teams were 5-0. As I hope they will be and think they can be. If USC Notre Dame gets overshadowed, it'd be nice if Notre Dame were to start like 2-3 or something.
Oh, that'd be great. Also, yeah, I just want to put out there one other thing that kind of I feel like helps the case is that Washington, say what you will, Oregon fans, is arguably just a top 10 campus, just with its location. With, the scenes and
I don't know what Oregon fans will say to me saying this, but it has the best view as a stadium of any school in the pack. Like with the water, and I'm also a sucker for boats. So like I've been around boats my whole life, so I love boats in the water and everything like that. So I don't think they would look at Husky Stadium and say, well, we don't want to go there. Like when have we ever had a good time in the Northwest, or when have they ever given us a good game or anything like that? But I think it could be pretty awesome, but it's not a guarantee, but there are more challenging weeks. Right. In terms of grabbing the attention of game day in week 7, there are more challenging weeks to go up against than just Texas A&M and at Tennessee and USC at Notre Dame. Like Alabama's playing Arkansas. That's not going to happen. Michigan's playing Indiana. Ohio State plays Purdue. Georgia plays Vanderbilt. None of those. That's LSU plays Auburn. Maybe.
Watch this be their 1 week of their FCS matchup. I'm like, we're going to go to, with all due respect, we're going to go to North Dakota State this week.
No, the only FCS matchup they should do is the Brawl of the Wild, Montana State, and that's not till much later in the year. But
the one point I wanted to make is that game day hasn't been up here since 2016. That was the last time they were here was Washington USC.
In the final year of the pack.
They should do something.
That's compelling. That's compelling. Exactly. I think at the very least, college football owes us as many game day appearances as possible, seeing as how the league is going to literally disperse after this year as we know it. So I like that. thought. 2016 was the last time they were in Seattle. Sounds like they're overdue for a trip. Anyway, I'm just saying.
Exactly. You get it.
Anyway, what do I know? Apparently nothing. So. You know a lot about the Huskies, though, and that's another reason I wanted to have you on the show. So this game that Oregon and Washington are going to play, I mean, it's not overstating things to say it could define either team's season with regards to the Pac-12 championship or the college football playoff. Now, other things have to transpire, but both teams could look back at the way this game plays out and we could be saying that game, win or lose, determine whether or not we got into the playoff or got into the Pac-12 championship game.
This is going to be just like, I think for the Huskies, and this is the second most important game when we think about it, because I know we talked on Locked On Pac-12 about the stretch they have at the beginning of November.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, but outside of USC, because the USC game is number one, just with everything that is. But this is going to be a very close second, because especially like you said, if both teams are coming into this 5-0, there's
you'll have an opportunity, either team. If Washington wins at Michigan State and Oregon wins at Texas Tech, they shouldn't have a problem with any of their other 4 games. For Washington, it's
the Arizona one will be tough because it's the desert. Weird. Desert.
True. I think they'll be okay though. I don't think Kalen DeBoer will stumble in the desert for a second consecutive year. So Boise State, Tulsa.
Yep.
Stanford?
No, Michigan State.
Yeah. But I was just listing the other 4 games. But for Washington, it goes Boise State, Tulsa, Michigan State, and then the 2 conference games are Stanford and Arizona?
No, Cal and Arizona.
Cal and Arizona. And the Cal game is in Seattle.
Yep.
Should be okay there. High on the Bears, though I am. Don't ever sleep on Cal. They gave Washington a fight last year.
They did.
Down in Berkeley. They just muddied up the game. It's just the way Justin Wilcox likes it. It was low scoring and 28-21, low scoring ish. I wouldn't sleep on that, but I think they'll be fine, especially at home. But if Oregon wins at Texas Tech and Washington can survive the road games against Michigan State and Arizona, the winner of that game is going to be, right in the thick of the college football playoff discussion.
Yes.
I don't see how they would. They're preseason top 15 teams. If they both start undefeated, you don't know what else is going on around college football, but it's not unrealistic to say, Roman, the winner could be in the first top 4 that the college football playoff committee releases, which I think comes around that time. It's like week 8 or 9.
Yeah, it's right there. This is all just aligning perfectly. We just made the case. ESPN, tune in. You're welcome.
Exactly.
That's it.
So we just need to get ESPN to start watching the show. We'll make that happen. Anyway, we'll get there. Baby steps. That's why you have to subscribe if you haven't already. Got to boost up the show numbers and such. But anyway, I would like for you to kind of discuss big picture why Washington is a Pac-12 contender this year, why they're a college football playoff contender this year, what they bring back. Everyone knows about Michael Penix, and I think the receivers as well. The Roma Dunzes, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, bring in Jeremy Bernard from Michigan State. They've got a quarterback. They've got weapons. They've got Jack Culp, the greatest tight end known to man. For those who are unaware, which is probably all of you. Yeah. I, once upon a time, crossed over the names Jack Westover and Devin Culp, who are the Washington Huskies' 2 tight ends, into one mega player named Jack Culp, who's both large, a great receiver, and an outstanding blocker. He's got the full package. But the weapons are all there. But what else should Oregon fans know about this Husky team going into this season?
I think the first thing they should know is that you left out a first-team All-American in guys that are coming back, and that's edge rusher Braylon Trice.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So we can start on the offense, because that's where this team prides themselves. And yeah, obviously bringing back Michael Penix, Heisman candidate. We're going to see how that plays out this year. Starting the campaign way earlier. Rome and Jalen McMillan were both 1,000-yard receivers last year. Jalen Polk was excellent last year. Jeremy Bernard, the transfer from Michigan State, has just been a beast throughout spring and fall practice. And none of those 4 players have been the most impressive receiver in the room throughout fall practice for Washington. That goes to my guy, Denzel Boston, a redshirt freshman from here at Emerald Bridge. And he looks like Rome does. He really does. He's big, he's long, he's fast. And as he grows into his frame, he's going to be an insanely physical receiver. So the passing game is going to be great. We know that. They're also bringing back both of their starting tackles in Troy Fautano and Roger Rosengart, who Rosengart was a freshman All-American. I believe Troy Fautano was first or second team All Pac-12 last season. Can't remember off the top of my head, but he's getting a lot of honors. I actually I spoke to a friend of mine who's in the draft business, and he has Troy Fautano rated as his top interior lineman for this next draft class. He thinks that, he might not play tackle at the next level, but comp him to Elijah Vera Tucker. You say with that what you will, but that's something that I rely heavily on. The interior of the offensive line is where the one big question is on the offensive side of the ball, because they're replacing both guards and their center, but there's a lot of talent there. Nate Kalepo started a couple games. He's probably going to fill in at right guard. Julius Buelo also has starting experience, and he'll right now is the favorite to take the other guard spot. And then Mateo Mele at center is a sixth-year center who this coaching staff is just absolutely in love with. They're very happy with him and just the way he's progressed. So there are no concerns about the offense. There are questions on defense, but there are a lot of questions that have, I don't know if been answered is the right term, but there are a lot of questions where they're not as prevalent as they were, let's say, 2 weeks ago, where the cornerbacks look solid. Jabbar Muhammad, a transfer from Oklahoma State, has been very, very good. Especially he's been asked to play against Rome Odunze a lot this fall and has looked really good against him. Elijah Jackson is starting to solidify the spot across from him. A super athletic dude who's just struggled with injuries in the past. It's nice to see him healthy. This pass rush, who's returning, as I said, not only Braylon Trice, but Zion Tupuola-Fatui as well, who was an All-American at one point in his career back in 2020 before an Achilles injury and a couple other things, which have slowed him down a little bit. He looks healthy. He looks like he's going to be a more complete player this year, not so much just a pass rusher, but he's going to be a little more effective against the run. And just remember, this team was third in the conference in sacks last year with 37. And yeah, Jeremiah Martin had 8.5, but they're bringing in some dudes off the edge. Voy Tanufi has fully transitioned from defensive tackle to edge rusher. He's a really fun player to keep an eye on. And then the captain of this defense, Adefwan Ulafosio, is back. He's finally healthy after coming off a couple of injuries.
Say that name one more time.
Adefwan Ulafosio. Yeah.
All righty. That's a name. That's a name and a half there.
I would call him Eddie, but he does not prefer that. His name is Adefwan, so we go with that. But he is finally healthy for the first time in, I want to say, a little over 2 years. He had a nasty injury that kept him out for the second half of the 2021 season, and then while rehabbing that injury, tore his ACL. And that kept him out for the majority of the 2022 season. His first game back was against Oregon State. He played well against Oregon. You might remember him as the guy who was going to make the tackle if Noah Whittington didn't slip on 4th and 1. Yeah, I had to. I'm sorry. But now that he's fully healthy,
at least he saved it for later in the show. If you led with it off the top, you would have made a bad first impression.
I feel like I would have just killed the episode and everyone would have tuned out.
You might have. I do want to ask you one question, because I think the only, well, I mean, there were a couple other moments for sure, but one redeeming positive image from that Washington game I think that Oregon fans have is of Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington just running through arm tackles in the secondary for Washington, and that was something that they struggled with for long stretches of last season. Do you feel that Washington has improved, not necessarily in the coverage department, but in the tackling department? Do you think they have the potential to be better in that area?
I think they do. One thing that didn't really get covered a decent amount where, there were a couple of guys that missed a lot of tackles. Asa Turner being one of them. Alex Cook, the two safeties, they struggled. But then there were a lot of just inexperienced guys playing in that game. Javion Green is a big one playing at corner. Big, hulking guy who is really, really impressive, really fun to watch. But he was a true freshman. And he was just asked to play that day and didn't necessarily have his greatest day. And the linebacker room has been overhauled a little bit. And Ulafosio is an awesome tackler. I think that he is going to make a significant difference. And then along the defensive line, they're returning a lot of guys, but everything does look better. And it's hard to gauge things when there aren't a lot of tackling practices, especially that are open to the media, that you can just sit there and say, oh yeah, they look like they're tackling a lot better. That's something where you kind of have to see it on the field. And I think that that's something where the coaching staff knows there's no way that they're saying, we're fine with that. So there's no way that this team is going to be that bad. I counted about 374 missed tackles in that game. I think just, rough estimate there.
That might be lowballing it, frankly. Like, it was like Bucky and Noah are really good elusive backs, but in that game it was just like they just wouldn't. I mean, they wouldn't go down. But that's why we're certainly happy to have them. And I am hoping that it ends up being game day. We might both have to be undefeated for it to really be a serious contender there. But come on, ESPN, you gotta throw us a little bit of a bone here as Pac-12 fans. Just like give us something to cling to and whatnot. You can cling to Roman's content if you want to. I'll plug it just for fun. I don't know how many are going to check out Locked On Huskies. Roman,
there's a surprising amount. I will say. I'll tell you more after.
Well, hey, that's why I'm covering all my bases here. Roman hosts Locked On Huskies on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast, just like where you can find this show. You can find Roman on Twitter at @Tomashoff34. Again, Oregon fans, be nice. We got to get our information on the Huskies from somewhere. Roman, appreciate it, man.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, go Ducks.